Next point. We're going to talk about pine cones. Now, you might be laughing. Some of you might know where I'm going with this. Some of you might have no clue. Why would we talk about pine cones? Okay? Pine cones and pineal glands. I got the link here for where you can go read this. Again, this is taken from Manly P. Hall's book, who, by the way, very influential occultist. He was a 33rd degree Freemason. Very influential Freemason and occultist. His book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, is one of the most authoritative books that is a general overview of the history of occult practices. Okay? Now, a quote, this is a quote from his book, and this is from the chapter, The Hieremic Legend, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly P. Hall. Okay? Hieremic Legend. Because there is a character in Freemasonry called Hiram Abiff. Right? So, let's read what he says here. Sufficient similarity exists between the Masonic Hiram and the Kundalini of Hindu mysticism. Okay, so have you ever heard about that? Kundalini, you talk about Kundalini energy. Kundalini is like this, supposed to be this serpent coiled at the base of someone's spine, and they can do yoga and other things to awaken this Kundalini energy, right? This taught in Hinduism and different types of yoga, these types, Hatha yoga, these types of things. But here he says the Masonic Chiram and the Kundalini of Hindu mysticism to warrant the assumption that Chiram may be considered a symbol also of the spirit fire moving through the sixth ventricle of the spinal column. And I promise you I'm going somewhere with this that's very significant. Okay? So he's talking about the spirit fire. This fire, it's a spiritual fire that moves through the spine. You hear this talked a lot about in the occult. The exact science of human regeneration. Now, what he means by regeneration is not what is meant in biblical Christianity. Regeneration in the Bible is when someone goes from being dead in sin to being made spiritually alive by the Holy Spirit. They're born again. They're made a new person. And so they might, some secret societies even use the word born again too. But the distinction is it's a different process. Being born again is, in the Bible, is you are spiritually dead, you love your sin, you hate God, you're in rebellion. And then when you're born again, that old person, that person that you were dies. You become a new person who, when you're born again, wants to do what is good, what is righteous, wants to do things that are pleasing to God, read the Bible, pray. That's the fruit of being regenerated, born again. That's not the fruit of being born again like all the rituals they do in secret societies and the occult and stuff, and going and laying in a coffin and popping out and saying, oh, you're born again, you've seen the light. Well, the result of that born again experience is not a desire for righteousness. It's even more in the depths of wickedness. Okay, so there's a big distinction here. But actually, what he's talking about here about regeneration is the process whereby someone becomes God. Okay, so let's look. The exact science of human regeneration is the lost key of Masonry. For when the spirit fire, the spiritual fire, is lifted up through the 33 degrees or segments of the spinal column, that you ever wonder why you see the number 33 everywhere? Everywhere. In the background in movies and in ads and all different types of places, people say it. I don't know why. Why does the number 33 pop up everywhere? Well, why is there 33 degrees in Freemasonry? Well, he's telling you. He says it's connected with the 33 segments of the spinal column. And he's talking about the spiritual fire going up through all 33 degrees and enters into the dome chamber of the human skull. It finally passes into the pituitary body, which is Isis, where it invokes Ra, the pineal gland, and demands the sacred name. Okay? So he calls the pituitary gland Isis, and he calls the pineal gland Ra. These are the occult symbols that he uses, these gods that he puts on those glands. Operative Masonry, in the fullest meaning of that term, signifies the process by which the eye of Horus is opened. Now there's so many truth bombs in here. You need to pay attention, okay? He's telling you something significant. He's saying the fullest meaning of the term Masonry, Freemasonry, signifies the process by which the eye of Horus is opened. Now you see the eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye everywhere. Even in Freemasonry, they have a square and compass with an eye in the middle. Or there's the eye floating above the pyramid, right? And you see that eye everywhere. That eye, he talks about it being opened. And the process by which it's opened is this spiritual fire going up the 33 degrees of the spinal column and hitting your pineal gland. He's going to show you. E.A. Wallace Budge has noted that in some of the papyri illustrating the entrance of the souls of the dead into the judgment hall of Osiris, the deceased person has a pine cone attached to the crown of his head. Now, why, in this Egyptian symbolism, illustrating the entrance of the souls of the dead into the judgment hall of Osiris? Okay, so on the souls of the dead, the deceased person has a pine cone attached to the crown of his head. Now, why would they have a dead person have a pine cone attached to their head? And then it says the Greek mystics also carried a symbolic staff, the upper end being in the form of a pine cone. There it is again. Egyptians, Greeks, using the symbol of a pine cone. Why? Why would they talk about a pine cone? Who cares about a pine cone? Which was called the thyrsus of Bacchus. In the human brain, there is a tiny gland called the pineal body, or the pineal gland, which is the sacred eye of the ancients and corresponds with the third eye of the Cyclops. Now, what he's telling you is, in the brain, we know that because we hear it all the time today now, right? This was written a while ago. He says there's a pineal gland. And he says that's the sacred eye of the ancients. It's the third eye. And so, little is known concerning the function of the pineal body, the pineal gland, which Descartes suggests, more wisely than he knew, might be the abode of the spirit of man. He wrote about that, the seat of the soul, I believe. Descartes wrote about that. Pineal gland, third eye, might be the abode of the spirit of man. As its name signifies, the pineal gland is the sacred pine cone in man. The eye single, which cannot be opened until Chiron, the spirit fire, is raised to the sacred seals, which are called the seven churches in Asia. That's where he kind of perverts the Bible. Not kind of, he does. Okay? So, let's summarize this. First of all, he says right here, the pineal gland is the pine cone. Okay? So, this authoritative occultist tells you straight up, the pine cone represents the pineal gland. And he just got done telling you the pineal gland is the third eye. And he told you before, what? He said the fullest meaning of Masonry is the process by which the eye of Horus is opened. And they open it through the spiritual fire going up, the Kundalini energy going up the 33 degrees of the spine. Okay? All ties together. And that's the process. By the way, regeneration means becoming a god. Okay? So if you just said it plainly like this, the goal in, he's saying, upper levels of Freemasonry and a lot of secret societies is to become a god. And to become a god is to open the third eye. And to open the third eye is through the third eye is the pineal gland. And you do that through the the spiritual fire going up the 33 segments of the spinal column, the Kundalini energy. How do you do that? Well, they talk about yoga and shaking and all types of other things. They're taking drugs. Everybody talks about it today. Now, isn't that significant? Before we continue, because we're going to talk about the Vatican again, right? But before we continue, don't you think it's significant that one of the most authoritative occultists and Freemasons in history is telling you that, hey, the goal here that we do in the occult is opening the third eye, the pineal gland, to become a god, right? And now we have people promoting everywhere DMT and ayahuasca to do what? Open people's third eye. Activate that pineal gland. Right? And so there's something significant about that. That this is something they focus on in the occult. Because please, I pray that if you are messing around with that stuff and you want to watch my video that I did called The Spiritual Danger of Altered States of Consciousness. I go in depth and talk about, from the Bible and from science, about trance states, altered states of consciousness. I talk about taking drugs like DMT, ayahuasca, what it does, the state it puts your mind in, and how it's dangerous spiritually. A lot of people see entities and weird things here. People talk about clockwork elves. Well, guess what? Manly P. Hall talks about elves. He calls them elementals. These are just categories of spiritual beings he talks about in the occult. Undines and elves and all these other types of things. Now, you just trust that these things are just what they say they are. They would never lie to you. Why do you immediately trust the moral character of something that you see? Some spiritual being. Automatically morally good, you assume that? Is that because you're scared to think that it might be something else lying to you? Assuming a different shape? Or telling you things that you want to hear? Causes a lot of confusion. But let me just tell you this straight. The pineal gland is there, obviously. You release, naturally, God put it there. But you, when you sleep, you do have DMT naturally released into your body. And that's fine. But when you start messing with it and trying to activate things and open the third eye yourself, you're messing with things you're not supposed to. And you're opening up doors you're not supposed to. And you're not going to be protected once you open that door. Also, after having said all this stuff about pine cones and pineal glands, you might say, wow, that's crazy. But who asked? You might say. Well, I'll tell you. There's a Catholic connection to this pine cone and pineal gland. Right here. Now, if you're listening, you can't see it. But what it is a giant pine cone statue. And there's a couple birds next to it. Now, what is this pine cone statue and where is it? Well, this pine cone statue is called the Fontana della Pina. And you can go read about this. Look it up on Wikipedia. Fontana della Pina, or simply Pina pine cone, is a former Roman fountain which now decorates a vast niche in the wall of the Vatican facing the Cortile della Pina, located in Vatican City in Rome, Italy. Okay? So there is a giant pine cone statue in Vatican City, composed of a large bronze pine cone, almost 4 meters high, very tall, which once spouted water from the top. The Pina originally stood near the Pantheon next to the Temple of Isis. It was moved to the courtyard of the old St. Peter's Basilica during the Middle Ages and then moved again in 1608 to its present location. In his Divine Comedy, Dante describes the size of the head of the giant Nimrod by referencing this fountain. He says this, quote, "His face appeared to me as long and large as is at Rome the pine cone of St. Peter's." So even Dante referenced it. The pine cone of St. Peter's. They have a giant pine cone. Also, got some more pictures for you. This picture, I will describe it, is the top is Babylonian god Marduk, and he's holding a pine cone. And then at the bottom, we see a pine cone in the staff of the Pope. He has a staff, right? And at the top of the staff is a crucified Jesus. It's a crucifix. But in the staff, randomly, is what looks like a pine cone. And they have the giant pine cone statue in Vatican City. Now, do we see anywhere in the Bible anything about pine cones that the Pope needs? First of all, there's no Pope in the Bible. But let's say there was a Pope. Is there anything about pine cones? No. Why would they have a pine cone statue and pine cones in their staffs? Well, we already read. Now, here's the thing. This pine cone, Manly P. Hall said, hey, this thing represents the pineal gland, the third eye. And that's one of the goals of the occult, is to open it and to become a god. And they knew this thing was right next to the temple of Isis in Rome. And they put it where it is now. Now, if they knew that it was completely pagan from the occult and idolatry, and they were good Christians, wouldn't they destroy the idol and get rid of it? But they kept it. It's very easy to know what it means, to study it. Why would we keep this giant pine cone there? Well, I think they know. I think they know exactly what it means. And they put it right in front of your face.